All right, friends, it's time to give you loyal listeners a discount on protein powder. You may or may not know, but I launched my very first protein powder 2 years ago. It's a grass-fed beef isolate with only 3 ingredients: grass-fed beef, either organic cacao or organic vanilla, and organic monk fruit. Now, if you don't want any of the added flavor and sweeteners, you can also just get unflavored. And no matter what flavor you choose, you're getting over 23 grams of protein per scoop, which is going to keep you full and satisfied between meals. I love starting my day with a Fab4 smoothie and breaking my fast with that much protein. It makes a serious difference in my cravings and blood sugar balance the rest of the day, and I've seen it with my clients as well. Now, I never thought I'd own a product company, but when I got pregnant with Sebastian, I realized the majority of protein powders were chemically extracted or enzymatically extracted, and I wanted to use heat and water only. I wanted minimal ingredients because we don't need those emulsifiers, fillers, or added vitamins, minerals, and probiotics. All of those additions increase the chances that it's not going to work for your body, whether it be bloating, digestion issues. I just wanted pure, clean protein to keep you full and satisfied so you could build the most delicious Fab4 smoothie. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the flavor. If you take a look at our reviews on Amazon, you'll see 5-star reviews for flavor. And that is key, because if you don't love your Fab4 smoothie and you don't love drinking your protein powder, you're not going to do it. It won't become a habit, and it's consistency that outpaces everything. So if you're here and you're listening and you want to give our protein powder a try, use the code podcast5 for $5 off your order. And let me know if you love it. My favorite ways to apply this protein powder is in my Fab4 smoothie, making freezer fudge, making chocolate milk, making hot chocolate, and throwing the unflavored into all my kids' baked goods. So let me know how you use it. Let me know if you love it, and share this podcast deal with your friends.
Robby Sansom is the co-founder and CEO of Force of Nature, a regeneratively sourced meat company based in Austin. Robby's roots run deep in the natural food community. Previously the CFO of Epic, Robby spent much of the last decade studying regenerative agriculture at ranches all over the world. Through this education, Force of Nature was co-founded with the intention to accelerate the creation of a global regenerative supply network. Force of Nature works in partnership with land stewards, ranchers, and farmers committed to creating a positive return on the planet. With Force of Nature, consumers now have the ability to invest in environmental regeneration by consuming meat that is good for the planet. Born and raised in Austin, Texas, he received both a bachelor's and a master's degree from the University of Texas. When he's not building businesses aimed at saving the planet, Robby can be found on a trail, ocean, mountain, or field, always making time to appreciate nature and explore his surroundings. Robby is also a land steward of Rome Ranch, where he owns regeneratively managed bison. It was important to me to have Robby on the show because it's become clear that a number of grass-fed protein delivery companies that claim that they are regenerative are not. Boxes and farms that I've purchased from for my family personally, that I've spent hard-earned money on. And so it's important to me that you know that I've made a complete swap for all of my purchases over to Force of Nature. If you tune into this interview, you're going to learn why. I just want to be always transparent with my community. If we know better, we have to do better. And I am putting my money behind that by purchasing our proteins from Force of Nature. They are extending a discount to you, 15% off your order. I'm not paid on that code. It's BeWell15. It's simply to make it more affordable for you and your family to make a swap. So that'll be on your first box order to give it a try. I definitely recommend the ancestral blends, the breakfast sausage, and just tuning in so you can learn a little bit more about Robby, his mission, and all the amazing regenerative organizations that Force of Nature partners with to ensure that we are improving the land and our planet, as well as our health and biology. So take a listen. Robby, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here 6 weeks after your first child is born. I know that can be tough to use your brain in this period of your life, but you have built this amazing company called Force of Nature. I want to know all about it. You know everything there is to know about regenerative ag. Your previous life was working at Epic, which is, one of my favorite protein bars to this day. And people are like, wait, no, it's like a beef jerky bar. I'm like, exactly. It's protein, but it's exciting to have you here, and I can't wait to learn from you. So thank you for sharing your time with me.
Well, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I feel like I get a lot of credit for being an expert on things I just happen to know a bunch about, but I rely on experts. You know what I mean? I'd say stand on the shoulder of giants is the phrase that comes to mind. So really excited to be a conduit to help connect people to some key concepts and ideas, and really for consumers, empower them, right? I mean, they play this incredible role and wield this incredible power to improve our food systems. And I feel like that's a birthright of health that we all have, and an option we should all have. And we're excited to be a catalyst in that movement, and can't do that without folks like you, letting us you have a platform to share a message. So really thank you to, and thank you to all your listeners.
Definitely. Well, I'm excited to have you, and always excited to learn. I think you should call yourself an expert, because if you've been on the business side trying to source or understand, it's asking those questions. You probably know more than most. So your background is you were born and raised in Austin, Texas. So I'm sure a lot of cattle ranches and things like that. When did you kind of start to understand the agriculture, like how cattle was being raised and how farms worked? And when did you decide to get involved and make a difference?
Yeah, I think for me, it sort of goes back to growing up more. I still grew up in the city of Austin specifically, but I had friends and family with land and small operations, more like homesteading type operations, not large scale cattle operations, right? And that really opened the door for me to work with some families if they were, harvesting one of their own, slaughtering a pig or a cow or, goats or sheep, or, doing some of those things that really on a local community type scale. And then, more than anything for me, hunting and fishing growing up. Right. And, having it sort of ingrained in me that you can connect with that ancestral wisdom and core that's in your DNA that connects you to your food and the land, and gaining an appreciation for and a respect for really the animals and the environments where they thrive, and an enthusiasm for, again, that being consistent with our evolutionary reality, right? And I didn't understand it in that sense, right? It sounds really philosophical today. As a kid, it's just fun and it feels right for some reason. But as I grew older, it became much clearer that there's a huge disparity between how our ancestors would have procured food and what they would have considered health and what we're procuring, right? So I kind of went down and got really into natural foods and organic foods, and tried vegetarian diets, and experimented with different things, all the cutting edge stuff, right? Trying to be progressive in my thinking and challenge my conventions and what is and isn't good food for me. And my past in business and managing startups kind of collided with a couple of friends of mine, and Katie and Taylor, the founders of Epic. We all grew up together and joined forces really early on in that. And it was really there where these worlds of mine collided, right? Again, that youth and understanding of harvesting our own food and some of the powerful realities of being human animals and part of nature, not separate or distant from nature, and peeling the layers of the onion back on the agricultural supply chains and the issues with our agricultural system, right? And so, yeah, that was almost a decade ago now, but definitely we've been going down all the rabbit holes to try to figure out where are the challenges, where are the opportunities with our agriculture system or in our food systems, right? And ultimately, how do we make sure that consumers are getting the best, most nutrient dense food that, really aligns with their values and needs, and more than ever is also celebrating the values and needs of the people on the front lines making that food in the communities that are collapsing at an alarming rate and being replaced by these other industrial sort of incumbents who may not have the same vision for what's important, whether it be planetary issues or human health issues or social issues or the well-being and values of consumers. So now we're on a mission to replace a vicious system with a virtuous one.
Well, that was a lot. So we're going to unpack all of that, because you brought up issues with the system of traditional agriculture, industries collapsing, planet health, soil health. We have to go into all of these buckets, but let's start with the issues of the current system of growing agriculture.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the path we went down with Epic, right? Was you kind of mentioned, meat bars, and it's like, right, yeah, we want protein as nature intended it, right? Let's cut out all the synthetic stuff and additives and processing. Let's try to figure out how we can put, healthy animal-based protein in a package and make it convenient. And, that led to, what is healthy? That led to, okay, healthy animals, are healthy. What makes a healthy animal? Well, they got to be in a healthy environment and a healthy system. And they got to be able to exhibit their, the behaviors that they evolved to exhibit in an environment where they're thriving. And that is contingent on, balanced ecosystems, and then healthy soils. And then, the list goes on and on. It's sort of this, light bulb type epiphany when you get to the end of it and you recognize that that potential is out there, and it's been there forever, but we've really deviated from it with our conventional farming systems, right? I mean, you look at nature gave us this incredible blueprint. It's balance, it's harmony, right? It's all of these, the complexity in that circle of life, death, decay, new life, right? All these things really built and developed the fertility in the systems that we've been mining for, the last few generations. And that's what that conventional system does. It's broken up and disrupted so many of those natural cycles and balances, and really kind of in a dominion human mindset, right? How can we control this and basically turn ecosystems into manufacturing facilities? And it's dawned what we call industrial chemical agriculture. Right. So instead of relying on and working with nature, we've engaged in chemical and mechanical warfare against nature. And by that, I mean, tilling up fields and spraying herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, fertilizers, all sorts of amendments onto the soil to make up for the fact that we've, again, disrupted the natural systems that would control for all those variables. And we've disrupted water supplies and poisoned water supplies and caused dead zones in ocean, are leading to pollinator die-off. And, the more and more we do this in the name of efficiency, we're destroying communities. And we're limiting options. We have fewer options of food available, and that food is less healthy. And really what we've done is, taking consumers from being a part of that system, helping to produce their own food in certain communities or be a part of these small communities, to being a slave a little bit to this machine. And this machine tells us what to buy, where to buy it, how to prepare it, to the extent where if it doesn't come in a box with some microwave instructions, a lot of people aren't getting it, or a lot of people are getting their food from a convenience store, right? And so we've lost so much access and availability to true healthful food and systems. And a lot of that's been done in the name of efficiency or under the value of cheapness, right? And that's what commodification is. That's kind of the mechanism that took us onto this journey, is promoting price above all else at the expense of all else. And lowering the cost of food can't be, needs to be understood, right? The shelf price isn't the only cost, right? And I say we've seen some small reductions in shelf price at a disproportionately massive cost to communities and our own health and the health of lands and animals, right? And at the expense of the future of food, right? I mean, what we're doing is not sustainable. We can't continue down this path and expect to be able to create food in the future under the same way, right? I mean, we're using up those resources and mining them to the point where we have to regenerate them. We have to allow nature back into the equation to re-implement and celebrate some of those processes that it does to help make sure this can sustain into the future. Otherwise, we hit an endpoint where we're no longer going to be able to produce food on our lands, and at a global scale and with a global economy, that can be catastrophic.
Right. And you've set out with Force of Nature to change that through regenerative agriculture. And for people listening, can you explain what regenerative agriculture is and what you're doing with your new company, Force of Nature?
Yeah, so regenerative agriculture is the top of the highest pole position on claims, right? We kind of see natural and then organic and antibiotic free and pastured and grass fed and all of these things, right? And I would say for the sake of the average listener, just to understand what regenerative is, it really is all encompassing. It's essentially the manifestation that a consumer might have of a beautiful, harmonious food system where, how you are practicing agriculture and how you are managing your lands actually results in a net positive on that land. It results in a net positive for the welfare of animals. It results in a net positive for the communities and people and systems that are, serving that food. And it results in a net positive for the consumers and their families and their communities that are relying on it at the other end. There are some basic fundamental components of regenerative agriculture that are just, relatively simple in concept to implement, right? You're removing, like I said, some of those effects of chemical and mechanical warfare on nature, right? So letting land rest, not applying all these toxic amendments to the land, keeping the soil armored so that it's protected from hot weather or cold weather or the impact of rain, improving water cycles and nutrient cycles. And again, there are these practice-based techniques that farmers and ranchers can use to do that. And I would also say what regenerative agriculture is not plant-based versus animal-based agriculture, right? What regenerative agriculture is planet-based agriculture. It's agriculture as nature intended. And it's not plants versus animals, but plants and animals, again, functioning in harmony. Animals have a job in nature. Plants have a job in nature. We need to let those key ecosystem services be highlighted and celebrated in the way in which we're managing our lands for both for food production and so that we have wild places and lands and wild populations of animals and ultimately a healthy planet, because this planet is a superorganism and we're a part of it, right? And we can be a steward for that. And what Force of Nature is trying to do is a few different things that haven't been done in meat specifically, right? First and foremost, we've seen and we've been working on it, as we noted with our past company and Epic. We've been working on building these supply chains and understanding the science and the nuance of this for nearly a decade, and we've seen the potential for it. But we recognize that it's complicated and it's complex, and in order to really drive a food revolution, we need to mobilize the consumer. And so we've started Force of Nature to really be a consumer-facing brand and to really be a key catalyst and creating awareness for consumers so they have access to knowledge that empowers them, and then further to give them access to a better supply chain, right? To give them access to a variety of proteins that are celebrating these values and helping to solve these issues and challenges that we're highlighting, whether they want to buy it in a retail store at their favorite local grocer, or whether they want to buy it online and have it delivered directly to their door, whether that's through their favorite restaurant chain or their company's office kitchen or whatever. We want to be everything for all people where they are. Really make it simple for them to be able to choose a meat or a protein that fits their needs and aligns with their values. And again, make sure they're aware of the issues so their values and their awareness as to what's important to them can be improved. And then, of course, by leveraging and mobilizing the consumer, we can do the same thing by building that supply chain and passing that value on to farmers and ranchers that help break them out of this kind of modern day sharecropping where they're really stuck. And they can then elevate their practices and standards and begin improving their land and improving their community. And we can ensure that truly our neighbors and people that are human beings and citizens just like us are the folks responsible for, making our food and putting their love and thought and passion and generational legacy into that, versus, seeing another 10,000 farms collapse every year and fall into the hand of these large businesses. And then our food production really goes down to profit driving for large businesses, right? And at the expense of all of the things that I've been talking about, right? Health, wellness, community, ecosystem, sustainability of this food production model, right? Those can't be externalities or consequences that we just turn our back on in the name of profit, right? That needs to be celebrated as much as any profit motive. And that's the system that we're trying to help create and again, connect consumers to the source of their food. And again, rekindle that wisdom and that reality that as humans, we're supposed to have a relationship with our food. Let's not put up curtains and blinders to distance consumers from their food. Let's make sure that they're involved in and aware of the type of food and system and communities that they're a member to and in support of.
I mean, you know this very well, and you've been working in it for a decade. I think for the majority of us, for me, I look to support grass-fed, grass-finished, regenerative farms. And sometimes the transparency, or it's like, feels like marketing, and you're like, okay, I'm supporting this really great small farm. And then to hear you say that 10,000 farms are collapsing and being like maybe taken over by large farms that are probably doing things in a quote unquote efficient, cheap way and not taking care of the land. Can you kind of pull back the curtain for me and explain why are these farms collapsing and failing, and what's the real
problem there for these small farmers, and how Force of Nature is supporting them.
It's pretty wild when you think that, our founding fathers called this a nation of farmers, and many of the founding fathers were. And you look at even the turn of the 19th, the 1900s, early 1900s, I think some 40% of food was coming from, or 40% of Americans or the population was involved in farming or production of their own food. And somehow now that's like less than 4%.
Wow.
So really it's there's been a lot at play, right? We've had a lot of people with a lot of land and the capacity and ability to produce a lot of food in a lot of ways. And that creates diversity, and that creates small food systems and local and all those things, right? And over time, the system has incentivized and rewarded consolidation. So, we've gone from, like I said, so many and diverse farmers and farming relationships to so few. And the average size of the farm has gone from a few hundred acres to thousands of acres. And we kind of adopted at the USDA and our ag, our federal government level, a get big or get out mindset. I mean, legitimately, that was a statement: get big or get out. And, what's sad is the cost of that is multi-generational farmers, the generational wealth. These people are here. This is their legacy, right? Their parents and their grandparents and their great grandparents and their great great grandparents, sometimes all the way down to the dawn of the history of the country, were involved in this, and it's their calling. And we've created a system that robs them of that and almost punishes them for it, to the point now where the average age of a farmer is approaching their 60s. Most next generation farmers are leaving the farm because there's not hope for staying. Most farms that are inherited free of debt will fail and fall into the hands of these large businesses. And now Bill Gates is the largest farm owner in the United States because somehow a large wealthy investor can justify an investment in agriculture when the people who have been producing our food and these heroes in these communities can no longer justify it themselves. And I feel like that is just a remarkable awareness to think about, right? How can it work for somebody with a ton of money and resources, but not work for the people that have been doing it for hundreds of years? That's how our system is fundamentally flawed and broken. Again, how it's creating those rewards and incentives that are counter to what's good for those producers of food. And then in the process, right, again, we now grow more corn and more soy than anything else. We're paid to overproduce it. So now corn and soy go into everything that's in the grocery store because it's cheap and it has 1,000,001 byproducts that can be used in 1,000,001 different ways to make things inexpensive, especially if they're highly processed. And so, I mean, that in a nutshell explains to how we got to the time now where we're losing still 5,000 to 10,000 farms a year. And that's not, I mean, it's mind blowing when you really think about what it is. It's people's identities. It's their sense of self-worth. It's their purpose, and it's a family. They're collapsing. And that's the reality. And I've read and heard stats that the rate of farmer suicide right now is higher than the rate of suicide for veterans returning from war. That's how challenged that their position is in this system, right? I mean, they are victims in this just as much as, animals that are being put in environments that are absolutely horrendous and awful. And they're a victim in this just like consumers who are being fed, food full of poisons and toxins in the name of efficiency and profits, right?
Right. So, I mean, this is obviously a huge countrywide, probably worldwide issue that can't be fixed by one company alone, but you're beating your drum and getting behind these small farmers and supporting them. How are you like saving their livelihood?
Yeah, I think a few of the things that we're trying to do differently to help that really, and again, it's a movement. It's not about us. It's about all the good actors and all the opportunity for hope out there. Our background and experience is in branding and business, right? And so what we're trying to do is, effectively be a content creation company in some respects, right? And a lifestyle brand to really take that center store modern digital world of brand where consumers want to have that relationship. They want transparency. They want to know that there's values behind and authenticity to what they're supporting. And they want to be reached in some of these digital channels and through some of these, modern, more innovative ways. And they want to be told stories, and they want to see that you're practicing what you preach and you're following through, right? And so, for us, a lot of it is trying to reach again and create awareness and access for consumers. The other side of it is scale. If we're going to really change the food system and change agriculture, we can't do it by being a million disparate little operations that'll never achieve the alignment or scale to actually, get those larger incumbents' attention, right? And cause a shift in the industry. And so for us, we're trying to not do what a lot of meat companies that preceded us have done and be vertically integrated, right? We don't want to own the land and own the animals and own the processing facilities, because that ties up our capital and our focus and our collective energy and bandwidth within our organization focused on those things. The reality is there are plenty amazing farmers that are focused on that already that need help. And there's plenty of amazing processors that are focused on that already that need help and capacity through their plants. And what we want to do is allow them to be the experts at what they're experts at and help them to justify those improvements by letting us be an expert in doing the branding part. And so building this large network of farmers and other producers and processors and further processors and doing it on a national and regional scale to help us get to that size where we can actually compete with some of the bigger players, and more than anything, create that rising tide, right? That benefits everybody in the network and benefits other good actors who we don't actually directly work with, right? Again, there's a ripple effect that then goes through this meat industry that supports this movement beyond our own reach and abilities.
Yeah, you're increasing when you educate the consumer, then they change what they want and they change their purchasing. And then now you have demand to continue to grow your operation.
I don't even think that what we're trying to do is change what consumers want. I think what's wild is it's more simple than that. We're just trying to help consumers understand that what they think they're getting is not what they're getting, and that what they want is actually available, right? And I think that's maybe one of the biggest takeaways that I hope we have on this call is that this industry has gotten really good at deceiving consumers and telling them everything that they want to hear. And I can give you all kinds of examples of it where it's disgusting and it's dishonest and it's misleading. And I think consumers already know what they want. You see it in the data. I think something like 80% of consumers bought an organic item last year, and more than ever, consumers are buying food that aligns with their values, whatever those values might be, from health to environment. Or, the number one driver of foot traffic into grocery stores used to be price, and now it's access to quality meat and produce above price for the first time in history. So, all the data is out there. It's just that the access to the truth is still being shielded, right? And we're still being, that conversation is being controlled by an industry that has, created these misleading labels like vegetarian fed pork and poultry. It's a perfect example, right? We all grew up or have seen that on packages as like this amazing claim. Oh, hey, this pork or this chicken was vegetarian fed. Congratulations, buy this, pay extra for this. Actually, the reality is that's just marketing spin. That's not a positive thing. It should be a red flag. Chicken and pigs, they're monogastrics. They're omnivores. They should be eating, plant seeds, nuts, but they should also be eating insects, grubs, and whatever. And if they're vegetarian fed and you're making that claim, it means that they've been raised in a synthetic environment, right? That they've been raised in a controlled environment with a curated food source, no access to outdoors where they can actually forage and have anything other than what's controlled as part of that synthetic environment. It means they've come from a confined feeding operations and they have not lived an evolutionarily consistent life, right? It means that they are unhealthy. And yet they figured that they could put that on a package and sell it to us and we'd eat it right up and love it. And so that's the industry that's controlling what we know about and think about our food. And you look at important milestones, these claims of grass-fed and organic, right? I don't mean to disparage them because we are ascending up and improving our food values and our access to better quality food and our awareness of issues because those things have existed. But you can be organic and grass-fed and be in a feedlot, right? You can be organic and grass-fed and not be regenerative. You can be, again, this consumer ideal of, I want to support a family farm who's doing the right things, who cares about the quality of what they're producing and the outcomes in the broader, local and broader communities and the impact on lands and animals. Like, that's the system that I want to be a part of. And I think if we oversimplify it, we think if we just buy towards these claims, that's what we're doing. And the reality is, you go to a large grocery store and you buy their private label or organic or grass-fed meat from behind the butcher counter, it's coming from JBS. just like everything else. It's coming from feedlots. It's coming from a system that doesn't really align with what you think it does. And so that's what we're trying to call attention to is, hey, if that's what you want to support, that's your prerogative. I'm not here to tell anybody what's right or wrong and what they should or shouldn't do. I'm just here to give them access to the truth so they can make the decision that actually works for them versus one that they're being misled into making.
Right. As a consumer, no one wants to pay more for the same product that maybe is just slightly better, but still from a feedlot. You mentioned JBS. Is this a large, like, agriculture company here in the US? Is this a distributor? Like, what are the big players in the industrial and chemical agriculture business?
Sorry, it'd be like Cargill, JBS, Purdue, Tyson, kind of those.
Got it.
Are the
so
big,
it's like a Tyson for chicken, but for meat. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Yeah, all the above. Yeah.
So I think that's the hardest part. We don't have the transparency. We don't know who to trust. And, there are a bunch of grass-fed or clean protein companies that are coming frozen to your door. And that's become a really popular business to get into. Are we getting the truth there?
Oh, definitely not.
Okay.
No, for sure not. And again, I think there's plenty of well-intentioned folks out there, but there's a lot of diligence required to really make sure that what you're doing is the right thing. Intention and outcome are not necessarily always the same, right? And I think, I think the way to identify that is not overly complicated, right? It's trust but verify. Mm-hmm. If all they're doing is telling you what you want to hear and painting a pretty picture, but there's no follow through, there's no evidence, and there's no transparency, they're misleading you. I mean, that's just the facts. And there's a lot of the biggest names out there. I'm not gonna rattle them off on this podcast. I'm just not gonna do it. I'd love to, trust me. Yeah. Because they're big. And some of them have been exposed for that more recently and gone out of business for it, right? And again, good people, well-intentioned people, but just not quite where we would have hoped and expected them to be. So a lot of money to be made. This is a $90+ billion industry, right? I mean, billion with a B, lots and lots and lots of money to be made. So folks who are good at marketing and know how to convince people to buy stuff can come in and put a positive spin on doing the same old thing and make some money at it. I think the trick is, and what we're trying to do is A, expose that, and again, B, empower consumers to make better choices. And I think what you'll see us doing is going above and beyond, right? We're not just saying we're grass-fed. We're showing you videos from different partner operations and highlighting them and writing blog content and educating on what these things are, sharing videos of our own personal operation as well, linking to content from other partner farms that we work with, right? And I think, seeing it unpack and making, fighting to make the claim regenerative and supporting not-for-profit organizations doing those things and funding films like, being sponsors of Kiss the Ground and work, that documentary and that organization, and working with Farmers Footprint, and again, being involved, and the proof is in the pudding. What are you just saying a bunch of pretty things, or are you actually doing something that's meaningful and driving progress, right? And I think we will and need to be even better at that ourselves. And we're working on, sort of how are we going to start to measure better and share annual impact type reporting and things of that nature. But, again, if somebody's not even trying, they're not sharing anything, then they don't have something worth showing you. And in fact, they probably are trying to hide the truth.
Right. I mean, I think that's the hard part, is that there have been farms that I've trusted that, have a video of their pasture raised animals, and they can invite you on the farm to camp or do whatever. And you're like, okay, I'm seeing these animals on the farm, but it's the operational part and being able to produce for, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, depending on the operation, where maybe we're not getting the whole truth. And you're alluding to that. And I appreciate that you're not naming names. I think it's respectful, but, I guess that's probably the hardest part for me, is that's why you're here, is because I'm like, wait, I thought I was getting the truth, and now I'm learning that I'm not getting the truth. What organizations can we follow, and how can we find farms in our local area if, say, for example, someone can't get their hands on Force of Nature meat you ship nationwide, but if someone wants to support a local organization, how do we find those family farms that are regenerative and doing it right?
Oh man, so much in there. Let me. I want to make sure I answer all those questions, so hold me accountable. But I'm gonna start with what I think the best sources of meat are. Right.
Okay.
I think the absolute best source of meat is for you to don a backpack and some sort of a rifle or bow and get on a mountain and spend days busting your tail, hiking up and down, chasing some game and, harvesting a wild elk and, sharing in that experience, that life and death and that transition moment and having just the utmost respect and appreciation for the bounty that's going to feed you and your family and having to work and earn it. And again, form a real tangible relationship and sort of a sixth sense understanding of that connection with food. And everybody should hopefully, do that at some point in their life, but not everybody can. And it's not going to feed everybody in these major coastal population centers on a day-to-day basis, right? And so, maybe the next best place to source your food is, to be an expert on regenerative and have read all the books and listened to all the podcasts and gone and done your own ranch tours to get a sense of who's full of baloney and who knows what they're really doing and is following through with the real deal. And to identify where those operations are local to you, right? Because just because they're local doesn't mean they're doing all the right stuff. It just means they're close. And that's good, but it's not all the things. And so being able to find somebody who is, to understand and how to validate what they are doing is the right thing and have that expertise, and then further to identify where they are in your backyard and then repeat that for, beef and then pork and then poultry and then whatever else you want to do, that's, if you can do that and you're in a place where you have that sort of access to those food producers and relationships, that would what I would say is the second best, way to access quality protein. And I think the third best way is what we're doing. We're trying to identify who those family-run farms are at a national scale and facilitate that connection for you across proteins and make it convenient. Again, whether it's your favorite grocer, which we're in thousands and thousands and thousands of grocery stores across the country, and we will deliver anywhere in the contiguous United States directly to your door for anything that we have, which is such a tremendous variety that it should be most of what people buy and then some, right? All the traditional proteins and bison and elk and venison and wild boar and some other really, really cool stuff. So, I think companies like ours would be the next best option and so on. So, that's really where we are. I'm not going to say that we're the best. I just think that we're the best at scale. That's an alternative to actually producing, your own food or having a neighbor who's doing it the right way. And I think as far as how to educate yourself, I mean, there's some great organizations out there and some great books that I'd recommend. We sell some books on our website. I love Dirt to Soil by Gabe Brown. I love Defending Beef by Nicolette Hahn-Nyman. I love Growing a Revolution by Dr. David Montgomery. And I could rattle off 100 more. I think Kiss the Ground is an incredible organization to follow. I think the book that they help produce and their documentary is a great one. I think the documentary Sacred Cow and the book Sacred Cow by Diana Rogers and Rob Wolf is another great place, and to follow them on social media as a great resource. Savory Institute is an international company that is specializing in animal agriculture on every content and all the unique nuance that is relevant for practicing agriculture successfully and all those. And they have so much information and resources. And again, the list goes on and on. But those are some great starting points.
And if a farmer, like for example, if a family-owned farmer is listening in and they practice regenerative agriculture, when you guys are looking to partner with a farm, what's the process look like?
Yeah, so I think the cool thing from the farmer perspective, for us, we've been doing this for a long time, so we have a lot of relationships and we've known a lot of these producers for again, nearly a decade and are working with and scaling with them. Many of them are at different sizes. Some of them are the largest landowners in North America. Some of them are, small family operations where we're able to help them get started and justify their efforts. And we're meeting them through Savory Institute because they've gone to Savory to say, hey, help me implement this. I want to implement regenerative agriculture on my land. Help me. And Savory helps them. And then there's a not-for-profit organization that builds a network and facilitates connecting them to companies like ours. Some of them we meet at, conferences like the Grass-Fed Exchange or, Grass-Fed Alliance or all these different kind of industry-related conferences. Or some of them read about them in, publications and magazines, and we say, holy smokes, these people are, clearly pioneers and thought leaders in their space. And so, for us, we'll travel out there and meet with them. And, there's not anybody that we're sourcing with that we haven't been to the land. seeing the animals, and most important of all, met with, and you kind of alluded on this earlier, met with the owners and the farmers and the producers, because I think mindset matters more than anything, right? It reveals itself pretty quickly whether somebody's saying the right things or somebody's doing the right things, and their mindset and their why behind their doing it, right? Why are they doing it? Are they doing it because there's a profit motive and an opportunity, or are they doing it because it's the right thing? And quite frankly, they're willing to lean in and get into the discomfort to find a way to make the right thing happen, even when it would be easier to do something different, right? So yeah, I'd say as a call to action for a small farmer or producer, I'd reach out to organizations like Savory, who are helping to build networks and provide guidance and training, and start to implement those practices, and then certainly to reach out to us, and we can help facilitate connections and evaluate opportunities to work together or connect them to other partners that we have in different areas, depending on where those folks might be and what they may be raising.
I love that. I followed the Savory Institute for quite a while. I've had Diana and Rob on the podcast and recommended the Kiss the Ground documentary and when it came out. And I think those are all amazing places to start to understand how regenerative agriculture can really support and facilitate soil health. And like you just said, there's an easy way to do it, and it may be more efficient to get more pounds of meat off your land and make more money, but what is the expense? Can we talk about what regenerative agriculture does to create, you mentioned it earlier, but a carbon neutral or carbon negative situation, and how soil health is impacted?
Oh man, now you're gonna really get me down the rabbit hole.
Let's do it.
I think there's so many issues with our food production system that really are, I would call them, global, potentially catastrophic if we don't get a check on them, get them in check, right? And I know the carbon issue is a really big one, so we'll touch on it, right? But I don't want it to come across as this is the only reality that needs to be addressed, right? I mean, there's a higher level of atmospheric carbon today than historically, right? And there's a lot of reasons why that's troubling and problematic, and people have pointed to, and there's debate around, impact on climate and the potential of what that could look like and what that could cost to do down the road. But what nobody can deny is that there's not enough carbon in our soils. And the biggest carbon sink on the planet, as far as land goes, is grasslands. It's pasture land. It's not even forest, right? It's grasses and all of those awesome lands that we now have turned into farmland, right? And for a shocking stat on the scale of that, the earth is about 30 billion acres of land, and about 11 or 12 billion acres of that we practice agriculture on.
Wow.
And to make it a little more bite-sized for your audience, the United States is roughly 2 billion acres, and roughly 1 billion acres we practice agriculture on. So half of the land mass of the United States. And you see that when you fly a plane, right? You're looking down out the window, it's mostly farm fields. And what we are doing in those farm fields is what I talked about earlier, taking natural thriving ecosystems and tilling up the ground and disrupting the soil life and the soil biology and the plant life. And doing that actually oxidizes living organic matter, which is releasing carbon into the atmosphere and killing soil biology that creates healthy systems. It's the foundation of life. Plant life comes from the soil, lives on the soil. Herbivores eat the plant life. Omnivores and carnivores eat the herbivores. We all die. We all decay. New life comes. We all go into the soil. Soil is the foundation of all of it. And it's this thin layer that covers, much of the globe. And even that, as a result of this process, is eroding away. Billions of tons a year we lose. And it takes 500 to 1,000 years in nature to build an inch of topsoil. And we're losing that on an annual basis globally. Historical carbon levels in that soil, it's just that's a lot of land I just rattled off, right? Historical carbon levels in that soil would be something in the United States, as an easy example, would be on average 7% soil organic matter, and most of that's carbon, right? Right now on our farmlands, on average, we're about 0.5% to 1% organic matter and carbon. So that's how much carbon we've lost out of our soil as a result of the way we're farming, and it's now in the atmosphere. And again, we can't be producing food and have thriving lands without returning we're all carbon-based life. Carbon's not evil. We need carbon.
Right.
And the way that we return that carbon into the soils is not through factories and new technologies and patents and inventing our way out of it. There's this incredible thing in nature called photosynthesis. And I'll take us all back to 5th grade and how that works. There's this incredible energy source that nothing can match, at least within our solar system, the sun, right? And so photosynthesis is, leaves from green growing plants and other, plant life are taking the energy from the sun and carbon dioxide and converting that into carbon-based sugars that they shoot into the ground and store in their roots and feed to the soil. And then they spit out the oxygen. So CO2 in, O2 out, carbon stays behind. We're building soil carbon as long as we're allowing plants to live and photosynthesis to occur. And one of the key fundamental principles of regenerative agriculture is, and one of the reasons you limit tilling the soil, right, is so not only are you not releasing carbon, but you're keeping green growing plants year round. You're allowing living roots in the soil year round. That carbon exchange is always happening where you're continuously pulling more and more and more carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it in the soil. And you're stopping that runoff issue. You're not losing that thin layer of life-saving, life-dependent soil at the rates that are faster than we can create soil. And that runoff isn't even happening because now your water infiltration is improving. And so you're actually mitigating droughts and floods because we're making effective use of the rain that we get. And it's being stored in the ground because guess what? For every 1% organic matter in your soil over an acre, you can store 20,000 gallons of water.
Wow.
So all of these issues from droughts to floods to toxins, and we allow nature's balance and harmony to occur. We don't need to apply all these toxins that kill our waterways and cause dead zones and end up where we have glyphosate in breast milk and all of the things, right? So it's like all of a sudden these seemingly disparate issues becomes really clear that there's a single system that impacts all of it, and it's agriculture. And the scale of agriculture, again, is mind-boggling when you think about what I just said. It's half of the land mass of the U.S. It's nearly 40% of the land mass of the globe has been altered in some way by humans, largely for agriculture. That's the scale of impact. If you look at those practices, don't oversimplify and think past this. This is a small thing. It's not a big deal. No, it's massive and it's a huge deal.
Wow. I mean, for some people, this might be like chlorophyll, more like borophyll, but for other people, me included, I am like, my eyes are as big as saucepans over here with all the stats that you just rattled off. And I want to make sure that we go back for a second. Can you explain what runoff is and how regenerative agriculture and how agriculture in general would create these, like you called them grasslands, and that's what they are, but these root systems and these green plants that are continuously on farms? Because when we picture, I think when most of us picture a agriculture farm, we picture cows on a pasture, maybe on a dirt lot, but yeah. Go back to
yeah. And I think a good way to answer that question would be to just talk through the principles of regenerative agriculture and give some examples.
Perfect.
And then I'd love to share on that carbon issue, the results of a life cycle assessment that we did that actually measures it and compares it to conventional agriculture and compares it to Beyond Beef and Impossible.
Don't get me
and
started.
shows you just how much more of a solution this is than those things, just on the carbon issue, but then also, again, on all these other issues.
Great.
There's 5 key principles of regenerative agriculture and maintaining soil health. One is limit disturbance, right? So stop tilling and stop spraying chemicals on the land effectively. Again, tilling not only oxidizes that ground and releases carbon, but it kills the largest living organism on the planet, the fungus beneath our soil, which is this incredible resource that helps mine and feed nutrients. And again, is like the information superhighway and nervous system for the soil biology to be able to promote health for everything in it. And again, a reflection of what is above the ground is a reflection of the health of what is below the ground. So as we're tilling it, we're killing that. We're not going to have a healthy food system. The second principle would be armor the soil. So again, leave it covered. Till it. What we do times of the year where we till it up and leave our fields bare, it allows rain to fall and hit the ground and compact it and makes it hard and crusty. But then it allows for runoff, meaning erosion. So water will rain and it will run off and take soil with it, or wind will blow and it will blow soil away like the Dust Bowl. And the other thing it does is, again, what's the perfect temperature to cook a medium rare steak to? right? Depending on your food preferences, you're probably cooking your steaks into 130 to 150 maybe. It's because that's a temperature where you kill some pathogens and you make it safe. And exposed soil can reach temperatures that exceed those in direct sunlight, and again, killing soil biology. But if you keep it covered, not only are you protecting from erosion and you're protecting from impacting, but you're protecting from these extremes, whether it's cold weather or hot weather, from killing that biology, and you're improving water retention, right? How often have you seen some leaf litter or thatch on the ground and felt underneath it and it's retaining some moisture, right? So again, it's part of healthy land. The third soil is living roots. We talked about that, talked about photosynthesis and the importance. There's soil life is the foundation of all life. And the way that it gets energy and lives is through photosynthesis. The sun fuels everything. And soil can only get the energy and the benefit of the sun through plants and through their roots. And the longer they live, particularly in grasslands, and the longer they're left undisturbed, those roots go deeper and they do more good. And in historical grasslands and the tall grass prairies and the Great Plains in the United States, the grass might have been 4 or 5 feet higher. There's stories of it being problematic for pioneers to pass because it would irritate the eyes of their horses that it was so tall. And those root systems would be 10 plus feet deep. Again, this incredible layer. And there's stories of the first tractors that were pulling through some of these fields. It sounded like thunder as it was tearing and breaking these root structures, right? And now we've, again, caused havoc with that healthy, thriving soil system and been mining that fertility without allowing it to replenish and replace itself. So that living roots is a fundamental mechanism for promoting soil health. Diversity, not surprisingly, a value that we should all have. It holds true in nature, right? Diverse plants do different things. Some fix more carbon, some actually fix nitrogen, so you don't have to spray nitrogen fertilizers like turnips or clovers, right? These are nitrogen fixing plants. They do the job that we have now figured out how to spray synthetic chemicals to do unnecessarily. Even insects, right? I mean, we all know what undesirable insects might look like and why they spray pesticides and stuff. And the truth is, where pesticides are sprayed, there's more undesirable insects than where it's not sprayed, because they're unselectively killing everything. And where we have healthy, thriving systems, there are thousands of desirable species that actually prey on those undesirable species and keep them in check. But when we nuke everything unselectively, we allow for these plagues and these major influxes. And so we've created a vulnerability and an exposure. So, and then, animal impact and diversity of animal impact, right? These grasslands, and this is really key for us, evolved with keystone species like the bison playing a role. It's a keystone species in our ecosystem here in the United States because it's keystone in that it has a disproportionate impact on its environment to its size or scale, right? These grasslands evolved to have herds of, the historical herd of bison without fences and without being limited by private property rights would have been, 40 to 70 million of the numbers that you hear. Bison roaming from Mexico to Canada, coming through, unselectively grazing on an area, trampling old decaying plant matter down so it could get to that fungus and decay and create more carbon in the soil, providing fertilizer in their dung and in times of drought or arid environments, giving it water through its urine, and being there for like a week and not coming back for a long time, right? Again, so animal impact, it's really, really key. And that's a lot of what we're doing with Force of Nature, is finding ranches and operations who can represent these 5 principles that exist naturally in nature and manage to those principles. So maybe it's on 1,000 acres. You're figuring out, how am I limiting disturbance? I'm going to stop spraying. I'm going to stop tilling. I'm going to allow the soil to stay covered. I'm going to recognize that weeds are there for a reason. They're doing a job. How do I help influence and guide? And how do I dance with nature and try to harmonize with nature instead of continuing this fight against it? And how do I move my animals around where I separate my land into paddocks and don't let them overgraze or undergraze an area, again, by managing to these principles. So I'll stop there because I told you to hold me honest to make sure I kind of painted a picture and answered all your questions. But that's a lot of the why and how and what behind the system that we're trying to, and the methods and values that we're trying to promote. And I'll give you an example on that carbon impact. I promised you I would, once you tell me that I'm free to do that.
You're absolutely free to do that. And I think, as a consumer, when you go to the grocery store or you make the choice to have a box of protein delivered to your door, you think that you're making that impact. Like, you think that you're supporting farms to be regenerative or to
really take it back to our, like, evolutionarily, like the way that these farms should be run and operated. Obviously, there are cities and things in the way of letting bison roam hundreds of thousands of miles all over our country, but to support that to the best of our ability and have these root systems. I mean, it's heartbreaking to think that grasslands were as high as horses' eyes and that we just ripped them to shreds.
Yeah, and I think there's some misconceptions too, because it sounds altruistic and idealistic if we just rewild things or we just take animals off of something, right? And the truth is that's devastating because we've removed large predators and we've removed these large megafauna, these keystone species that play these key roles, right? And so, and there's so much private property. Again, half the country now at a minimum. Well, really quite a bit more than that, right? But what we need to do is try to manage our land in a way that is as best as we can emulating nature, right? It's just the system's been too disrupted to leave it to its own devices, and too many of the key mechanisms have been removed. If you just take a farmed field and you rewild it and don't put animals on it, what's going to happen is it's just going to grow a bunch of shrubby brush, and it's going to be, reclaimed in a way that wouldn't necessarily be historically accurate for that area, right? So it would be changing and evolving in a different way, but it wouldn't be managed consistent with its history. So I told you I wanted to share this life cycle assessment, right? Because again, carbon is kind of the big thing that everybody likes talking about. And
I'm going to stop you for a second. Can you explain what a carbon life cycle assessment is first?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
And so we've been told that animals are bad for the environment, and we've been told that they produce more carbon than anything and use more water than anything, and all these lies, right? But let me break it down. So a life cycle assessment, an LCA, is a cradle to grave evaluation of the carbon impact of some system, right? So it goes all the way to the food supply, the raw materials, the labor on a farm, in this case, the gas used to run equipment, the animals' lives, the slaughter step, and then the distribution of that product into the end consumer. End-to-end assessment of the life cycle of something and the carbon impact of it. And so for some baselines, they say and then they measure not just carbon, but it's like methane and the other greenhouse gases. They're all carbon equivalents is what they call them.
Okay.
So the worst example of conventional farmed beef, the life cycle assessment is something like 20 pounds of carbon equivalents emitted for every pound of product produced. Mm-hmm. You get into, on down into, conventional pork and poultry in the high single digits, things like corn and soybean in the low single digits. And then you get to these, false prophets making all the promises in the world and not following through on any of them, and beyond meat and impossible foods. They're both at about 3.5 and 4 respectively, meaning for every pound of sludge that they produce, they're emitting 3.5 pounds or 4 pounds of carbon and carbon equivalents. They're not a solution, right? Yeah. They're just painting meat as a villain, and they're using the worst example of meat as their, as the caricature for what they want to try to attack to position themselves as better relative to this incredible regenerative multi-species farm in Georgia that we've worked with for a long time. We helped fund, in our days at Epic, helped fund a life cycle assessment on that ranch. We used a company called Qantas Labs, the same company that Impossible used to fund their life cycle assessment. And the result was that for every pound of beef that we produced on that farm, we were able to sequester 3.5 pounds of carbon and carbon equivalents. This was White Oak, Will and Jenny out there in Bluffton. Yep. And so, the easiest way to think about it, again, chlorophyll, borophyll, our friend Adam Sandler, right? The easiest way to think about it is this: to offset the carbon produced by a Beyond Burger, you will have to eat one regenerative beef burger, right? And so again, it's actually drawing carbon down. And you could go into the science of it. I think it's punitive towards animal agriculture because it penalizes the factor how it treats and looks at methane or enteric emissions, the belches effectively of the fermentation process that happens in the rumen. I think that's completely bogus how it's accounted for. And if that was reconsidered and looked at slightly differently, that drawdown number would be massively more favorable even than it already is. But it already is as good as the best alternatives are bad.
Yeah.
So, that's really exciting. And again, this is a system where they've improved soil carbon levels, they've improved water retention, they've improved nutrient density in the food, and they've improved the environment and bought brought species back from extinction into the, locally and back into the area, and so many other things, while also producing food that doesn't, cause inflammation and kill people by relying on all these seed oils that Impossible and Beyond are. And really what these plant-based companies are doing is they're actually perpetuating the status quo. They're relying on large chemical industrial agriculture, monoculture systems that have caused all these problems. They're just further processing it in plants and trying to put a new face on the same old things. And they're leveraging the same misinformation campaign to try to confuse and convince people that it's something that's better for them when it's not. It's the exact same thing, just a new package. It's more soybeans, it's more corn, it's more garbage.
Right. Oh, it's so frustrating, and especially interesting for me as a nutritionist when people maybe don't follow along with the fact that I am a meat eating nutritionist and lean more towards whole foods and animal-based proteins, is the assumption that I would be proud that they would be eating a Beyond Burger or an Impossible Burger when I obviously don't know as much about regenerative agriculture as you do, but I know enough to know that the ingredients on the back of those packages are not great for you and loaded with emulsifiers and solvents and all kinds of crazy things. So I would like to go back to the nutrient density that you just touched on, that using a regenerative agriculture increases nutrient density. And I would like to bring up and ask a question. Obviously we all want to be purchasing proteins that sequester 3 to 4 pounds of carbon into the ground versus omitting that. Would you say that it's important for people to eat less meat and only regenerative meat? Is it important for people to eat what, how do we justify, or how do we reconcile with what's available, with what we can afford, with what's best for health?
Yeah, I think this is where we kind of get into we can really get into the weeds, right? I think more meat, for the consumer health, I think more meat and quality protein is better than not, right? And I kind of tend to agree with Diana Rogers on that point, right? And I think you have had her on and her position there, right? I think we're also barely scratching the surface on what we know and understand about what we'll call nutritional density, right? I think Fred Provenza's work and we're learning more about, phytonutrients and all these other, components and qualities of our food that, again, we're just at the dawn of beginning to understand, the impact, not to mention, some of the unintended things that may be in our food if it came from a system where it was storing some toxins in its fats and so on and so forth. Right. And so I think there's just a lot of layers to what makes the traditional or even more progressive understanding of something nutritionally valuable. I also think there's something to be said for the health of the animals, right? I mean, if you think about it, you just look at where we place value with beef. The more sick the animal is, the higher we rate it in terms of quality, right? Here's my example of that. A select animal versus a prime animal. Well, a prime animal has more intermuscular fat, which likely means it's been more sedentary and it's been accumulating fat and within its muscles in a way that wouldn't necessarily be evolutionarily consistent. It's just what makes it easier to sell and taste good. So we've selectively bred to celebrate for those sorts of things, right? Personally, like I said, going back to my elk hunting example, I want to eat healthy, thriving animals, and I want the benefit of all of the goodness of their life and their history and the impact they've had and that energy and whatever else you might personally see and ascribe in your own with your own personal values. I want to be eating animals that are healthy and that are coming from these sorts of systems and have all of these that are part of the positive outcomes and values, and I want to feel that connection too. And so I think there's so much we know and don't know about how to rate and qualify what makes something healthier than something else. But I think, and then further, I would say we can look to, vegetables and plants and some of the research that's been done by, other organizations that's saying, hey, within these systems, we know that an orange doesn't carry the same amount of vitamin C as it did 50 years ago, and spinach on iron, and the list goes on. And we can say the same things about some of these key minerals with meat as well. And so I think, again, there's a lot we can assume, there's a lot we can say anecdotally, and there's a lot we can say empirically, but we're really growing leaps and bounds in that area specifically, right in the here and now.
Right.
I mean, I will say just personally, when I can, for the health of myself and my family, I'm making the decision to purchase regenerative proteins, but that might look like getting a box of Force of Nature and getting an ancestral blend and knowing that like I'm giving my kids or sneaking liver into their diet. And I think about that nutrient density,
Right.
you know, like that I love for pregnancy and I love for breastfeeding and I love for kids. And just think about these like critical points in our life when getting specific nutrients, whether it's vitamin A or, you know, these iron, for example, like critical minerals like that make a huge impact on our cognitive development and our health as a whole, without feeling bad that, hey, I'm sending Chris to the grocery store, we're getting some groceries delivered and we're out and I'm not going to eat protein just because I don't have a box of Force of Nature at my door, because I know ounce for ounce, it's providing more minerals and vitamins and nutrients in a smaller serving for my family. But it's it's obviously a hard conversation and you're part of the solution. And I'm so thankful for that. But I was just curious what your personal, decision-making, how your personal decision-making goes for you and for your family.
Yeah, I think, I gave up buying meat from a grocery store in 2018 before finally resolving that I was going to take a stand and try to solve this problem. Our journey with Epic was great and fun, but it also growing a business and going through that kind of success. We never wanted to necessarily do it again. We weren't just looking for something to do.
Right.
To the contrary, I think we felt compelled and like we were in a unique position to address these challenges, and nobody else was. So we wanted to, stand up and continue the mission that really we started there. And I think it's troubling to me that more people don't have access to this. Right. I think it's troubling that people mean well and are well intended and go and pay the premiums they do, thinking they're getting something that isn't quite what they expect or desire. Mm-hmm. I think that being taken advantage of, I have a major problem with that. And I think it's unfortunate that not enough people who otherwise would have access, right? And again, like I said, that's why we're trying to address that awareness and access piece for consumers. Personally, I'm fortunate that I'm connected enough to be able to, for my family access. But yeah, this is what I'm eating. I'm eating largely what I harvest myself, or what we produce at Force of Nature, or what our friends and are part of our supply network are producing. And I think the other thing too is really interesting shifts in how our brains work and how we've been trained and molded as good little consumers in this system supporting these big businesses. We've been trained to think that meat should be cheap. And the cheapest thing in the grocery store, which is crazy because these are living animals, these are sentient beings, and it's the most. And again, regardless of regenerative versus conventional meat is the most nutrient dense thing in the store. And it's what's funny is even our product, even premium, more expensive regenerative meat is still less expensive on a cost per ounce than a Hershey's bar. But somebody would look at it on the shelf in the meat section and say it was expensive, but not bat an eye at buying a bag of potato chips. Right. And you could buy a pound of our beef, let's say for $8 or $9. And, that package has like 100 grams of protein in it. You know what I mean? And you could go for $8 or $9 and buy a package of chips and a big gulp and, a corn dog sitting on a little rolling tray at a convenience store and spend more than $8 or $9 and only be giving yourself toxins and think that's a lunch. And it's like we have this weird perspective on what costs a lot and where there's value, right? And so I think that meat is remarkably inexpensive, and even the most premium of meat is remarkably inexpensive relative to some other things that we might, consider, especially when you look at what it's doing for us, all the value that it brings into our diet without all of the detracting, again, processing aids and toxins and implications and things like that have an adverse impact on these systems like we've been talking about, and an adverse impact on your own health. So I think that's an important, thing to present. And then I will touch on the ancestral blends on the nutrient thing because you talked about it. And I love it. Right? I think, for me, when we came out with that line, we were trying to think, how do we do something new and innovative and get on the scene and solve a problem that doesn't exist? Because we can't just come on with another brand and expect that to be the thing that gets our foot in the door. And it was a few years ago, and they had just said, hey, for the first time in history, the next generation, it has a shorter life expectancy than the one that preceded it in the United States. It's like, wow, how can this modern day, in our advanced, all this technology, and we're actually going backwards. We already know that we're terrible relative to other nations, but now we're going backwards. It's like, wow, we couldn't be further from, our ancestors and wolves and other animals. Like, the organs would be the most highly sought after, most nutrient, like truly nutrient dense cuts, and most selected for. It's like, wow, we've lost touch with this ancestral wisdom and this fundamental part of our diet. And it's become not palatable for us at a time when we're least healthy and need it the most. So how do we reincorporate that into the diet and celebrate it? And so it's, okay, let's introduce it through our ancestral blends. And we have a version of regular beef and a version of regular bison and a version of regular chicken. But then we have ancestral beef and ancestral bison and ancestral chicken, where we've actually incorporated in a small amount of organ meats with the intention of honoring the modern palate that's sensitive to some of those stronger flavor notes, but really reintroducing those nutritionally dense cuts that are necessary for us to reclaim our birthright of health, right? So I eat a lot of ancestral blends, a whole lot. Like, that is probably 3 days a week in my house.
Oh, I mean, I cannot even tell you, because I love getting in the kitchen and getting my hands dirty. And I have purchased livers themselves and chopped them up myself to try and mix them into ground beef. And you've made it so easy. And for me to do my job, I need to be able to recommend things that I know are taking my clients' health to the next level, but that adoption doesn't happen unless it's easy. And you're in the meat industry, so you understand. I mean, I have clients who will not make a chicken breast with the skin and the bones in. Like, it needs to look like a piece of chicken cutlet, or like, a strapless bra or something, for them to actually cook it. It can't look like meat at all. Like, they don't want that connection to it. And I get that. But what's so easy is that even with those ancestral blends, because the organs and the liver are ground into it, I feel like ground meat is one of the easiest things for people to learn how to cook, and to get in their kitchen and just saute up to make tacos, or to throw some riced veggies in there and mix it up like just bowl style. Call it the cowboy skillet, when it's just that ground meat and some chopped greens and some cruciferous veggies. Stir it up, you're good to go. And it's fast. Like, it can be the most nutrient dense fast food. So I love that you're doing that, because I am now at least having ancestral blends once a week. My goal will be to get to your 3 times a week, but you make it so easy. Yeah,
I think there's so much you can do. And I'd add the beauty of frozen veggies in there too. Fresh veggies are great, but for convenience, when you're in a pinch and you weren't prepared, you need something, having some meat and veggies in the freezer that can be a go-to. It makes it so easy.
Definitely. I use my freezer more than I ever have now that I have 2 young kids too. You have to be prepared.
Yeah, I'm learning about that storage of breast milk. So I got some really full freezers, and I was pretty proud of how efficient we got it. But now we're having to really shift things around.
Yep. Make room for the bricks of gold. Oh my goodness, Robby. Well, this was so informative. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, for starting Force of Nature, for being on this mission for health for all of us, for making organ meats easily accessible, for supporting these small farms. I mean, I don't want to lose 5,000 to 10,000 small farms a year. I don't want these farmers to be suicidal. Like, that breaks my heart. Like, just to think about their grandparents working so hard on the land, and for them to feel like they don't have a way to keep their own survival. Like, that's why you're here. And that's why I wanted to give you this platform. You're making and improving the health of not only each of us, but our planet and our soil health. So thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, thanks for sharing this platform, right? And if I could just leave one parting message with the folks listening, it's, you really hold all the power as consumers, right? Nobody's going to make products that you won't buy. They can try to force stuff down our throats and force stuff on us, and that's what they've been doing for a long time. But if we wake up and take a stand, we will change the system. We've seen it happen time and again, and that's why we're here in America, in a country that rewrote the rule book and changed the system. And it won't take much from us to do that, and to get what we really want out of our food and out of the food systems in the process. So don't feel disparaged. I know I shared a lot of stuff and painted some scary looking pictures, but if anything, feel hopeful and recognize that, we wield the awesome power to drive the change that we want to see. And, we're going to be complicit in supporting whatever system we choose to support with our dollars, and hope that, you'll follow us and educate yourself and figure out how to support the system that aligns with your values.
Absolutely. Well, I also want to make it very, very clear that podcast is in no way sponsored. I'm going to give people a code, thanks to you, Robby, BeWell15, to receive 15% off of their first order at forceofnature.com. This is not an affiliate link. I'm not being paid on this. This is strictly for you guys to get excited and to go out and try these ancestral blends, to just elevate the nutrition in your home, and to realize I think one of the biggest shocks for me was when you start to compare that price for protein, like when you actually look at ounce for ounce versus a Hershey's bar, like it really is just in our head what is expensive and what isn't expensive based on nutrient density. And I mean, I feel like I'm pounding the pavement trying to get young moms and kids eating more animal proteins, especially since I became pregnant the first time and became a mom. It's now even more important for me to get people like you on the podcast.
Well, Robby, I want to thank you so much for being here. I truly would not be eating as much liver without the ancestral blend. I love everything that you're doing for the regenerative movement. And I just want everyone to know this podcast is in no way sponsored. I'm so inspired by the work of Force of Nature and all that they're doing. And Robby's company, Force of Nature, is offering you a $15 off code to try it. Using the code BeWell15, you'll take $15 off your order online at forceofnature.com. So glad to get this information out to the masses. Thank you, Robby, for being here, and have a great day, guys.
Cool. Thank you again.
Thank you for listening to Be Well by Kelly. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at bewellbykelly.com and follow me on Instagram at bewellbykelly. I would love if you picked up my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. They're sold on Amazon and at all major booksellers.